There are many kinds of death. Some are better than others.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in 28 years later. And thanks to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. Now, if it's been a while since you've seen the first two movies, we do have a full recap posted on the channel, and you can go check that out. But here is a quick and dirty synopsis. In 2002, infected chimps released a rage virus into the UK, and within just 28 days, the entire country has fallen. After about 5 weeks, most of the infected starved to death. Now, in the sequel, 28 weeks later, NATO and the US military attempt to repatriate parts of London. Surprise, surprise, that was a bad idea. There is a new wave of the virus and the military flattens most of London to ensure that it's contained. But at the very end, we find out that the infection made its way to Paris. Alright, so let's get this party started. 28 years later opens up on a shot of the Teletubbies on an old television. You can even see the screen is rounded compared to the flat screens that we have today. Now this is perfect because we immediately get a sense of time and place. The first film came out in 2002 and this TV would be modern at the time. Rewatching it today, it is filled with all these little bits of 2000s nostalgia. But now, with 23 years between us and the first film, it creates a super interesting set design where their world is permanently stuck in 2002. And through the television, we know exactly where they paused life. Now, as the kids are watching the TV, we hear mayhem. There's even air raid sirens, which hugely foreshadows the military themes in the film. Air raid sirens were equipped and installed in England around 1938 to prepare for World War II. They were one of England's first defensive measures, and here they're being sounded just as England enters a new, never-ending war. It's also interesting to note that this is the first time we have seen the early days of the outbreak on film. In the first film, we see the first infection, and then everything from there on is shockingly 28 days later. We saw some of the initial outbreak in the comics, but it feels completely different and a lot more brutal to see it in action. And man, the way it spread so quickly to so many people was just chilling.
But person, why are all the zombies spitting blood? I've never seen zombies do that, and I know a lot of stuff about zombies, person.
Well, two things. These aren't technically zombies. The correct term is infected. The traditional zombies of movies like Night of the Living Dead are just that. They're reanimated corpses. The zombies in the 28 Days Later franchise are actually just regular people infected with the rage virus, and the vomiting is a symptom of that virus. See, this is not a normally occurring illness. It was created in a lab by two scientists who were actually trying to stop rage. To disseminate this cure for rage, they genetically altered a virus to be a carrier. The base of that virus was Ebola because, and I cannot stress this enough, these scientists were stupid. Long story short, the virus mutated, and instead of curing rage, it created absolute rage monsters. And as it mutated, it also triggered certain symptoms of Ebola that they tried to dampen. So that is why they vomit blood. Their body is breaking down due to the Ebola virus. It's also why their eyes turn red. Now, Ebola causes the capillaries in your eyes to break, resulting in blood filling the whites.
Oh, hey guys, does anybody want to buy this thing?
Well, what is it?
Doesn't matter, I want it. Here's some money. All right.
Doug, you have to stop spending money like this. Seriously, you can't just... Really mature, thank you.
I'm sorry, person, but I just don't know when to stop spending because I'm just a little dog.
Yeah, I hear you, and I used to be the same way. I always had trouble sticking to a budget and keeping track of my finances. Like, about a year ago, I realized I was spending about $70 a month in subscriptions that I had no idea I even had.
How did you find out? Did you pay a lot of money to hire a team of financial experts?
No, I used Rocket Money. They're the sponsor of this video. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that lets you manage your subscriptions, lower your bills, make a custom budget, and grow your savings all in one app. Rocket Money has helped its members save up to $740 a year when you use all of the app's premium features. They've also helped members save over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. This happens to me all the time. We'll cover a show on the channel, I subscribe to some streaming service, and then I forget about it. Rocket Money, though, lets me cancel my unwanted subscriptions with just a few taps, and sometimes they can get you a refund for some of the money that you lost. But Rocket Money also helps me keep track of all my spending, and they help me to set saving goals. They can also scan your bills to find savings and help negotiate your bills for you, from internet service to cable and phone bills, so you don't have to worry about long customer service calls. Let the app negotiators go to work for you to try to get the best possible rate. But most importantly for you, Doug, Rocket Money helps you to create a customized budget in seconds. You'll get notified about upcoming charges. Like, get this, one time I signed up for a trial for some sales service and I forgot about it, and then they would have charged me $2,600 for a year subscription, but Rocket Money caught the mistake before it happened and I was able to cancel before I was charged. So I highly recommend getting control of your personal finances by signing up for Rocket Money with my link below. Go to rocketmoney.com/ScreenCrush to get started for free.
Hey, does anybody want to buy this TV? No. Thanks, Rocket Money.
Okay, now back to what I was saying. After his house is overrun, we cut to Jimmy running into a church, which is a reference to the first film. In 28 Days Later, a church is not only the first place Jim goes, but it's also where he's first attacked by an infected priest to be exact. In both movies, it's a simple but very effective way to show how bad things are. Even churches, a place associated with safety and reverence, is falling to the virus. Society is crumbling to such an extent that nothing is sacred. After the infected completely overrun the church, title cards fill in the gaps between this movie and 28 Weeks Later. Basically, after they push the virus back, England is just left to rot. And honestly, this is pretty in line with what we've seen from other governments and militaries throughout the series. In the comic book, which bridges the time between 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later, there are survivors that genuinely think the entire world must have fallen because the outside world has done so little to help them. And in 28 Weeks Later, once the rage virus is rampant, they just start shooting everyone, infected or not. Also, I find it really interesting that Ireland is also in the quarantine. The closest point between Ireland is still about 12 miles apart, so I really want to know how it spread there. And then we get the iconic 28 Years Later matching perfectly with the font and style from both of the first and second movie. We cut to Lindisfarne, also known as Holy Island. Now the moniker comes from the monastery on the island and because it was the Celtic center of Christianity at one point. And then we meet Spike. I love the detail of the Power Ranger action figure in the room. Like the Teletubbies, it immediately conveys that they are frozen in time. He also picks it up and puts it back down, symbolizing that he is leaving behind his childhood and becoming a man. The fact that he's leaving childhood is also highlighted when his mother, Isla, freaks out about him going to hunt on the mainland. She calls Jamie a baby killer. And this isn't literal. Of course, Spike could really die out there, but even if he lives, he'll no longer be a baby. The violent act of hunting the infected will take away his childhood. Now, as soon as he goes downstairs, we start to feel the warlike atmosphere of this community. He's shocked to have bacon, especially for breakfast. Something that we take for granted for them is a huge treat. And as they walk down the street, we see that basically everything is rationed. There are signs warning that resources are low and asking that people don't use too much water. This community is essentially in a never-ending war with the infected, and even in the safety of their village, they live in wartime conditions. As Spike and Jamie leave, they're reminded that there's no rescue if they don't come back because it's too risky. And this is a great parallel to what the rest of the world has done to them. They've just decided that it's too risky to help them. And then we get the iconic Boots poem from the trailer.
Don't look at what's in front of you.
Now this poem is by Rudyard Kipling, inspired by the repetitive military marching in the Second Boer War. And as we hear the poem, it cuts between Spike and Jamie heading out to the mainland and various war footage, each with its own special meaning. There's footage that looks like it's from World War I or II, but importantly, it doesn't show actual combat. Instead, it shows little kids playing at being soldiers. This is also intercut with the actual children of Holy Island learning how to shoot bows and arrows. This is all very reminiscent of All Quiet on the Western Front, which follows a young German who is so excited to fight for his country during World War I, and upon actual combat realizes that warfare is actually awful and he has been sold a lie. Holy Island exalts their soldiers to the point where children dream of their first hunt. But as Spike is about to learn, hunting is awful. There's also shots of medieval warfare, highlighting the inherently medieval nature of the community. Not only have they been reduced to bows and arrows, a primitive weapon, but their entire community has a naturally occurring drawbridge. It also feels like they live in the shadow of a castle because the monastery looms over them. And the last footage that we see is sniper footage taken directly from 28 Weeks Later. As I mentioned earlier, once the virus was released, the military began killing everybody regardless of whether or not they were infected. It's a big turning point in the movie where the military goes from good guys trying to help rebuild England to men who will just do whatever it takes to survive.
Abandoned selective targeting. All targets are now free.
In this case, it reminds us of the longevity of the war. It really started the second that the outbreak occurred. But it also hints at something discovered on the in-universe website, RageLeaks.com. A sniper looks down on its target from a point of relative safety, exactly the way the rest of the world is looking at England. RageLeaks showed us that NATO knows about this very community. They keep files on them, and instead of doing anything to help, even dropping resources, they just watch. RageLeaks also implies that NATO is engaging in some kind of intense cover-up, but we'll talk about that when we talk about the ending of the movie later in the video. Now, as they're leaving the island, there's also some chromatic aberration and distortion, which I loved. Part of 28 Days Later was filmed on a Canon XL1, which gives a very distinct, low quality and grainy look. It's iconic now, but it's one of those looks that's really difficult to pull off twice. 28 Weeks Later, on the other hand, looks clean, too clean compared to the original film. Here, they really struck the balance between the grainy, distorted look of the first film and a modern movie. And the craziest part, a lot of this movie was actually shot on an iPhone. They made super cool special rigs and just went for it. And much like the handheld cameras in 28 Days Later, it all comes down to practicality.
And it's incredibly flexible because it's light. So you can take it anywhere, and we wanted to take it to quite remote places.
As they're exploring the mainland, we get a quick POV shot from the infected as they hunt a deer. Now, POV shots are quintessential to the 28 Days franchise. Some of the most intense shots of the first film are POV shots of the infected running toward our main characters. In that film, POV shots were denoted by heightened colors, like they turned the saturation all the way up and it reflected the angered, frenzied state that the virus put them in. But I like the use of complete red for these new shots. These infected are older and more deteriorated, and this complete red wash represents how much more intense the virus is. But it could also be because their eyes are filled with more blood than their predecessors. Gross. The fact that they can hunt is also a new addition to the canon. In an interview with Brandon Davis, Danny Boyle says,
nature will find the virus isn't going to burn itself out, it's going to find a way to survive, and it's mutated.
And one of the ways this virus survived is that it mutated, but the hosts also evolved. When there were no more humans left to eat, they learned to hunt. Cutting back to Spike and Jamie, we see another evolution of the virus, the fat, slow ones. Boyle said that this mutation of the virus was inspired by how much energy the host expended with the first virus. They're constantly running and raging, and as a result, they starve quickly. So to protect against that, the virus mutated, and now its hosts stay low to the ground and conserve a lot of that energy. And I also think it's a nice nod to early zombie movies. Boyle was inspired by Romero's Night of the Living Dead, and even though these are infected, 28 Days Later still feels like a zombie apocalypse movie. Now, one of the brilliant and most innovative things about 28 Days Later is that the infected were fast. Before then, there were always just these really slow, shambling zombies. So 28 Days Later totally changed the game and reinvented the genre. I mean, we never would have had The Walking Dead, Train to Busan, or The Last of Us without 28 Days Later. Now, while it was really innovative, it also ruffled the feathers of longtime zombie lovers. In fact, George Romero doesn't like fast zombies.
Say what?
In an interview with Vulture, he said, "I took a big swipe at fast zombies in Diary of the Dead. There's a running gag in that movie that dead things don't move fast." Now, the inclusion of slow zombies here is a great way to pay homage to those films without letting go of the fast zombies that the series is known for. As they're foraging, they find a house with this poor soul in it. The name carved on him is Jimmy, aka the child we meet at the beginning. When Jamie says there are strange people on the mainland, he's not wrong. It's just not Dr. Kellson. One thing that the 28 Days Later series always emphasizes is that there are the monsters, and then there are the people who are the monsters. And this is our first glimpse into the people monsters of this new trilogy. Now, I love this bit where Spike hesitates to kill the infected, but his father says that he needs to because it gets easier every time. And there's such a nuanced element to the infected. There's a very real reason people have dehumanized the infected. It made it easier when someone was bitten and they only had 10 to 20 seconds to kill them.
Look, if someone gets infected, you've got between 10 and 20 seconds to kill them. It might be your brother or your sister or your oldest friend. It makes no difference.
But the infected are people. They're not undead, but actual people. And there's always been this question of how much respect and compassion they are owed. For example, one of the most chilling scenes in the entire first film is this.
And eventually he'll tell me how long the infected take to starve to death.
Even though he's infected, it feels senselessly cruel to do this to another human. This shot of the horde coming over the hill is both terrifying, but it also tells us a lot about the state of the infected. Think about how many infected we saw at the beginning. I mean, this is a fraction of that group. Their numbers have dwindled down, not just through the hunting, but also by starving. And this is when we get the official introduction to the Alpha, according to Boyle.
And another way it's mutated is into a kind of almost like the virus has acted like a steroid.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, POV shots from the infected are really common in this series. But as Jamie and Spike are running away from the horde, we also see shots that represent their mental state, and those shots are also distorted. There's a cracking or doubling effect at points where images are repeated, and again, the chromatic aberration comes in. And that's because in this moment, the fear is affecting the way that Jamie and Spike see the world. While the infected's vision is distorted by their rage, Spike's vision is distorted by his fear. Once they're in the attic, they stay put. Now, this is partially because of the tide, but it's also a callback to one of the rules in the first film.
Lesson 2. Only travel during daylight.
Once they're forced to go out into the night, I love the details of the stars. Without light pollution, they can actually see them, and it's beautiful. Throughout the series, there is an emphasis on the fact that even in this awful world, there are moments of beauty. And this is particularly impactful because this is a beauty that they can only see because of the apocalypse. Now, that's obviously not saying that it's worth it, but I like how Boyle intersperses these little grains of beauty and hope. After their very dramatic run back to the island, there's this massive party, and the militarism of this island is on full display. There's no real care for the fact fact that they almost died or that it was traumatic. Instead, it's used as entertainment, passed around like a war story instead of a fresh psychological wound. And it makes sense because Holy Island celebrates this type and level of violence. This whole party was planned because Spike would kill an infected. As long as that happens and they live, it's a good ending. Psychological costs be damned. Notice they even give him a beer because in this society, his act of violence makes him a man. But as his father drinks and cheats, Spike is the one who goes home and takes care of his mother. And that moment, when he's caring for her, he is the man of the house. It's not the violence that makes him a man, but the dedication to his family. And this is made even clearer in the morning when Jamie refuses to tell Spike that his mom has cancer. Jamie is acting like if he doesn't name it, it won't actually kill her, which is super childish. Spike actually comes up with a plan, albeit an outlandish and childish plan, but he's actually doing something instead of ignoring it and waiting for the problem to go away. In fact, this exchange between them really highlights the problem in their society. They are surrounded by death constantly. They have crosses on the gates. Spike has drawings of the infected in his room, and they even have masks to make them look like the infected. They view death as an enemy, which makes sense because they've seen a lot of terrible violent death. But this also means that when confronted with a natural death, a death they can't fight off, that they just can't confront it emotionally. Now, one of the last images we see in Isla's bedroom are these dried flowers, most likely there to ward off her smell. But as soon as she steps outside, we see live, fresh flowers. Once again, even in this awful situation, there is beauty in the world, beauty in the last trip with her son. They spend the night in the ruins of a church, which is actually a direct callback to the first movie.
The raisins so much.
When Spike goes on lookout, he leans against these ornate table legs depicting soldiers at their posts, and this really solidifies that he is truly a little soldier. Now, in contrast to the many soldiers on the table legs, he looks alone, but truthfully, he has support, as proven later when his mom bodies that zombie. This also highlights where he is on his journey to adulthood. He is growing up, but he still needs his mom. Then we cut to the soldiers who were stranded on the island, and did they learn nothing from the first two movies? Never go into tunnels. Never. When we cut back to Spike and Isla, she's having one of her episodes. She asks, how many years have we fallen back this time? 1,000? And of course, this sums up what's actually happened to England. Instead of the easy car rides and carefree childhood that she recounts, they have to go on foot, and her son has just become a man at just 12 years old. Now, surprisingly, the infected attack again. They hide in a Happy Eater, which is a UK chain that closed in the late 90s. Now, this would have been a late holdout even in 2002 when the outbreak occurred. And once again, it's another reminder that their world is frozen in time. And then they meet Eric, who really doesn't want to be on this island. And you know what? I don't blame him, but he reflects an attitude that was common among the early survivors of the outbreak, that survival was the most important thing, more than morality or empathy.
Good people.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice, but you should be more concerned about whether they're going to slow you down.
His first instinct is to ask, why did I save you if you can't do anything to help me? People who are trapped on this island found ways to maintain their morality, but with people who are new to this situation, a darker streak emerges. And I think this will be very important to future movies, especially if there is an outbreak outside of England. It is also this lack of morality that gets him killed. He is so adamant about killing the baby that he draws the attention of the Alpha. And speaking of that, let's talk about the pregnancy. So now we know that the infected can have perfectly healthy babies. And Dr. Kellson later mentions the miracles of the placenta. Basically, fetuses and their mothers have completely separate circulatory systems, and the placenta acts as a barrier to make sure there isn't any blood exchange. The fetus never comes in contact with the infected blood, and therefore they remain healthy. And we have to wonder how this infected got pregnant. One option is that she was pregnant when she was infected, and because of the placenta, the baby just kept developing as normal. But the infected are also acting on primal instincts, and making a baby is a primal thing. And then we meet the great Dr. Kellson, played by Ralph Fiennes. And instantly, it's obvious how differently he views the infected compared to the people on Holy Island. Instead of viewing them as monsters, he just views them as sick people. According to Danny Boyle, that's because he's a doctor. Of course, he's not going to view a sick human as an entirely different species. This respect for the infected extends even to their deaths. The Bone Temple looks scary, but it's actually beautiful. Not only is he memorializing the dead, but he's also laying them to rest. Burial and funeral rites are one of the things that make us uniquely human. In creating this, he is preserving both his humanity as well as the humanity of the dead. Now this, along with the phrase memento mori, captures the stark contrast between him and Holy Island. He is physically surrounded by death, but he's celebrating the beauty of each life. Meanwhile, the residents of Holy Island are surrounded by life, but they only celebrate violence. Also, the next film in this franchise is called The Bone Temple. It's already filmed, so safe to say that this place is going to come back. And then we get the reveal that Isla has cancer, and this was heartbreaking. When Dr. Kellson drugs Spike so he'll calm down, it seems like a callback to this scene in the first film.
Are you trying to kill me? No, sweetheart. I'm making you not care.
I love that the climax of the film is actually Spike laying his mom to rest. This movie is a very messed up coming-of-age film wrapped in a zombie apocalypse world, and performing funeral rites for his mom is the final piece of Spike's arc. He was taught that violence made him a man, but he could kill every infected in England and that still wouldn't make him a man. He came of age because he stopped treating death and violence like a war game. He started respecting it, and when he kills infected going forward, it's not just because every kill gets easier, it's just for his own survival. He's left the war games and target practice of his childhood behind. And then we see one of the most insane tone shifts I've ever seen in a movie with the introduction of an adult Jimmy. I genuinely got whiplash in the theater.
Yeah, why is he wearing a tiara and why are they doing flips? Personally, I am so confused.
Alright, I'll do my best to explain. See, Spike is a boy who just came of age. Jimmy is an adult man who is essentially still a child. See, Holy Island has its issues, but Spike did grow up in a pretty safe environment. He got a childhood and he grew up relatively slowly. Jimmy had his childhood violently ripped away from him. And as a result, he's just kind of permanently stuck at age 7. And that's very obvious in his choice of clothing. Him and his crew look like toddlers who raided their parents' closets. Also, because he saw so much violence when he was so young, he is incredibly desensitized to it. If Holy Island views violence as warfare, Jimmy and his cult view violence like a video game, inconsequential and entertaining. Also notice that he is wearing his father's cross, but it's flipped upside down, denoting his turn towards evil. Now, we already know that Jimmy is going to play a big role in the Bone Temple, so let's talk about what's next. The Bone Temple has already filmed and it is slated for release in early 2026. The story is still written by Alex Garland, but it's actually directed by Nia DaCosta, who also directed The Marvels. It's also confirmed that Aaron Taylor Johnson and Jack O'Connell are reprising their roles, but here's the big surprise. Cillian Murphy is reprising his role as Jim from the very first movie. Now, this is huge. We have not seen him at all since the first film, and we only got a quick mention of him in the comics. So we have no idea what he's been doing for the past 28 years. I am super interested to see how he comes back, and I think that there's potential clues on the website Rage Leaks. The website is centered on the idea that the governments are hiding things about the outbreak and the status of the infection. But we don't know who is leaking the information. In fact, there's only one real clue. In a file titled MSG, the author says, "The virus brought us more than rage, the sorrow for our lost home." So we know the author is from the quarantine zone. And we also think that it's odd that Ireland is included as part of the quarantine zone. Jim was living in London when the outbreak occurred, but the character is actually Irish. This was confirmed by Cillian Murphy. So maybe that's why Garland decided that Ireland should also be quarantined. It would be a double loss for Jim. And there's also pictures of the Bone Temple in the leaked files. I'm wondering if Jim is the person leaking these files. It would be totally plausible that, after escaping, he is horrified by the thought of survivors being left to fend for themselves and he wants to expose it to the world. It's also worth noting that in the comics, Selena and a journalist actually do sneak through the original quarantine zone. And there's an entire message about the closest point between England and France. Maybe someone will sneak onto the island to try to expose the truth.
Yeah, then they'll expose the rest of the world, right?
Yes, and spread to the rest of the world. But hey, it's a zombie movie, so it has to spread. So that's everything we caught. Did we miss anything? Let us know down in the comments or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky Threads, or on our free-to-join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.